We'll get 3 over there, but we try to have at least 4 at each table for discussion as well as perhaps trivia. I'm Ann. I run the Social Sunday, which is a different format, most of you know. It's more about small group discussion and empowering everyone to have equal airtime in speaking. Do we have any newcomers here? I don't see anybody, I don't know. Newcomers? Okay, I want to thank people for upping their donations, which are actually contributions toward our expenses. Us board members, we're getting more and more in the hole, so we really appreciate people helping us out with that. Upcoming Sunday, October 20th, will be Dr. Larry Martin, who is an author of 25 books. He appears to be a real Renaissance man, lots of interest. He's giving a talk. What? He's giving a talk on the Israeli.
Don't build him up too much this early.
It'll get to him. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict before and after October 7th, 2023. October 27th, 24th, coming up, we will not have a meeting because it's the 4th Sunday in the month. Freethinkers, which is our sister organization, alternates between Bridgeport and Aviary, and the time alternates, so you don't want to get confused. It's 2:30 at Bridgeport, it's 3:30 at Aviary. October 24th at 3:30 at Aviary, Dr. Larry Martin, again, is giving a presentation on Irving Berlin, his life, his music, and it's featuring samples of his music. That's all. We're going to start with, yes?
Just to make a brief announcement.
Sure.
Since a lot of people, well, many of you know Jim Laurent, who is not here now. But his wife Tammy passed away earlier this week.
Peacefully.
And I thought, yes. And I just thought there would be people here to know that.
That's a great idea.
And Jim said, he would find the pass on.
Okay. Yeah, she died at home peacefully. And Scott, you had an announcement. I explained to Scott it has to not be partisan because we have made a decision that if we want to welcome all, we have to draw some limits. We don't tend to be very inviting of religious folk, but I think we've decided to draw the line at not being inviting to people of other political persuasions. Go ahead, Scott.
This is nonpartisan. It has to do with the judges and justices who are on your ballot for judicial retention. A lot of people don't know much about these judges. I have some information for you. A number of people here signed the petition to put Amendment 4 on the ballot. That amendment stayed on the ballot only because 4 of the 7 Supreme Court justices voted to keep it there. 3 of the justices who voted to prevent you from having the right to vote are for judicial retention. These are Justices Francis and Sasso. If they stay on the court, you can bet that they will do everything they can to frustrate implementation of Amendment 4 if it passes. In terms of the appellate judges, and I'm going to keep this short because it's complicated. If you have questions, see me later. Commissioner Warren Miller was convicted on bogus perjury charges after he voted to increase the developers' impact fees so it would roll back the 25% property tax increase on residents that was enacted in 2019. His conviction was thrown out on appeal by 3 appellate judges who are now up for retention. I think they showed tremendous courage in voting to overturn that conviction. These these judges who I think should be retained are Sal J. Kilbane. I'll put a sheet of paper on the back table if you want to take a picture of their names if you haven't voted yet.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, we're going to start with a 15-minute video. You all probably know the topic. The video is the science of psilocybin, and it's used to relieve suffering. Now, for those of you who did not go through the 60s, psilocybin is psychoactive. It is a hallucinogenic. It's most similar, not to LSD, but more similar to peyote, mescaline, the drugs used more for spiritual experiences by lots of people over centuries. So let's start with the video.
So like trying to mix oil and water, most people assume that science and spirituality don't play well together, but it's not true. Einstein said that the most beautiful and profound emotion we can experience is the sensation of the mystical. He said it's the source of all true science. Today I want to tell you about research with the classic psychedelic psilocybin that's showing that under supported conditions, psilocybin can occasion mystical type experiences associated with enduring positive changes in attitudes, mood, and behavior. The results are fascinating in their own right, have implications for medical therapeutics and implications as well for the nature of consciousness and ethics and altruism. So by way of background, I've been conducting research on mood-altering drugs for the past 40 years. About 20 years ago, I started a meditation practice that profoundly shifted my worldview and got me very curious about the nature of spiritual experience. I became reacquainted with research conducted mostly in the 1950s and 60s, showing that under some conditions, classic hallucinogens like psilocybin could occasion mystical experiences that look very much like those that occur naturally and that have been reported by mystics throughout the ages. I became interested in psilocybin. Psilocybin is the principal psychoactive component of the Psilocybe genus of mushroom. Psilocybin in the form of these mushrooms have been used for hundreds, possibly thousands of years within various cultures for healing and spiritual purposes. Well, while I was interested in studying psilocybin, research with this whole class of compounds had been blocked for decades because the risks, which are real, but they're manageable, were thought to totally outweigh the benefits. So it seemed like a long shot at the time, but my colleagues and I sought and ultimately obtained approval to administer psilocybin to healthy volunteers who had never before had an experience with this class of drugs. And as I'll show you, the results were life-changing for many of those participants and turned out to be career-changing for me because psilocybin has become one principal focus of my research program. So what I want to do today is tell you about the Johns Hopkins Psilocybin Research Project. It's in its 15th year. We've given psilocybin to about 250 volunteers, over 600 sessions. I'm going to tell you about psilocybin studies in healthy volunteers, in cancer patients, smokers, long-term meditators, and end with some conclusions. So we've conducted 3 rigorous double-blind studies in healthy volunteers. We've looked at dose effects. We've added controls for expectancy kinds of things. These sessions for these studies are held in a living room-like environment. Before the first session, volunteers develop a trusting relationship with our session monitors, which reduces adverse effects of psilocybin. On session days, volunteers come in, they swallow a capsule. They're encouraged to lay on a couch, use eye mask and headphones through which they listen to a musical program and direct their attention inward. If fear or anxiety arise, then the monitors are there to provide reassurance. So, not surprisingly, a high dose of psilocybin under these conditions produces hallucinogen-like effects. So there are perceptual changes like visual illusions. There's greater emotionality like increased sense of joy, less frequently fear, and there are cognitive changes. But to me, the most interesting effect was that in most volunteers studied, psilocybin produced great increases in questionnaires that had been specifically designed to measure naturally occurring mystical experiences. These experiences are characterized by a sense of unity, a feeling that all people and things are connected, accompanied by a sense of sacredness, a sense of positive mood, love, joy, and a deeply felt sense of encountering ultimate reality. These experiences are felt to be more real and more true than everyday waking consciousness. Now, psilocybin is a relatively short-acting drug, so by the end of the session day, these effects are gone, but vivid memories for these salient experiences endure. In one study, we had volunteers return a month after each session to complete some questionnaires. 80% of the volunteers in that study, after having one or two high doses of psilocybin, reported that the experience was among the 5 most personally meaningful and spiritually significant experiences of their lives. And in fact, about 50% said it was the single most personally and spiritually significant experience of their life, comparing it, for instance, to the birth of a firstborn child or death of a parent. These are stunning and remarkable findings. Long-term follow-up of these kinds of effects shows that they're sustained, these positive effects are sustained for at least a year and probably longer. And it wasn't just the volunteers who reported these effects. We did structured interviews with friends, family members, and colleagues at work. And this statistically verified the volunteers' reports. So we've continued this whole line of research over the last several years and studied other populations, the first of which are psychologically distressed cancer patients. So we've recently completed a study in 51 cancer patients with life-threatening cancer diagnosis who met clinical criteria for having a depression or anxiety disorder. These volunteers were randomly assigned to receive either a low dose or a high dose of psilocybin under double-blind conditions. Now, these results are still preliminary, but they're very promising. And what this graphic shows is the percentage of volunteers showing clinically significant improvement in depressed mood. The orange bar shows that 92% of those people who received the high dose of psilocybin 5 weeks after the session were reporting or were showing clinically significant improvements, much greater than the green bar that shows the effects after the low dose of psilocybin. The blue bar shows that the effects of this high dose of psilocybin are sustained out to 6 months. So about 80% are continuing to show clinically significant improvement. And in fact, in 70% of these, the symptoms have remitted to the normal range. We're showing similar effects for anxiety. These effects are really quite remarkable. What we're showing here is a single exposure to a substance producing substantial and enduring antidepressant and anxiolytic effects. Such an effect actually is unprecedented within the field of psychiatry. Another population we've looked at are cigarette smokers seeking abstinence. These are long-term smokers, multiple failed quit attempts. In our first pilot study, 15 volunteers, we integrated a cognitive behavior therapy for smoking cessation with our supported psilocybin intervention. In this study, volunteers had up to 3 psilocybin sessions. The first session corresponded with their target quit date. And this graphic shows urinary cotinine, which is the major metabolite of nicotine, over the course of the study. You can see in the first 5 weeks, volunteers are showing high levels of cotinine, and that's consistent with the fact that this is the period where they're learning the cognitive approach to smoking cessation. It's prior to their quit date. Then we hit that target quit date, urinary cotinine falls dramatically, remains down. At 6 months, we have 80% abstinence rates. So like the cancer data, these data are remarkable because 6-month smoking cessation rates generally run in the order of 15 to about 30%. So we're now proceeding with controlled clinical trials. Another population I want to talk about are long-term meditators. So I've come to think of meditation and psilocybin as being complementary processes for investigation of the nature of mind. And in fact, neuroimaging studies show that they both produce similar changes in brain regions related to a sense of self. Well, if meditation represents the tried and true course for investigation of the nature of mind, then psilocybin surely represents the crash course. And in this case, we're interested in whether long-term meditators are showing beneficial or perhaps detrimental effects of psilocybin exposure. Again, the data are preliminary, but I can share that most long-term meditators find these experiences to be remarkably insightful, and they report beneficial effects to both their sitting and their non-sitting awareness practices, although none would claim that psilocybin is a substitute for meditation, which results in much more stable day-to-day awareness. So stepping back, the basic finding here is that psilocybin, under these supported conditions, can occasion, in most people studied, mystical type experiences having positive long-term changes in attitudes, mood, and behavior. I want to conclude with 3 implications. The first is scientific. This is a really interesting effect. And the fact that we can show it reliably, dose-dependently, means that we can now turn the tools of science to prospectively investigate the causes and consequences of these effects. We can look at things like neural brain mechanisms and the effects, for instance, of genetics or personality or expectation on these effects. The second implication is medical therapeutics. Our data with cancer patients are being used by 2 private sector organizations now, the Hefter Research Institute and the Usona Institute, to ask FDA whether we can now proceed with large-scale clinical trial with the goal of seeking approval of psilocybin for treatment of cancer-related end-of-life distress. And obviously, ultimately, end-of-life distress is not limited to just cancer. In terms of the smoking cessation, our work and studies from other laboratories suggest that there might be very substantial application of this approach to treatment of addictions and quite possibly other behaviorally based medical or psychiatric disorders. And there's a very recent preliminary data suggesting the possibility that psilocybin may have treatment or may have efficacy in treatment-resistant depression. But the final implication, and the one that's most interesting to me, is this. The fact that psilocybin can occasion most people studied mystical type experiences virtually identical to those that occur naturally suggests that such experiences are biologically normal. And it raises the question, why are we wired to have these salient, felt to be sacred experiences of encountering ultimate reality, of the interconnectedness of all people and all things, experiences that are arguably provide the very basis of our ethical and moral codes common to all the world's religions. Well, I think there's something about the mystical experience that relates intimately to the very nature of consciousness. Just reflect on the mysterious truth that if you direct your attention inward, you become aware that you're aware. An indisputable and profound inner knowing arises that we can all access individually and perhaps collectively. I think this inner knowing is at the core of our humanity. We recognize at some deep level that we're all in this together. And there's an impulse that arises for mutual caretaking. I further believe that investigation of this inner knowing through contemplative and other spiritual practices can give rise to profound worldview shifts of an uplifting kind, an awakening to a sense of freedom, peace, joy, and gratitude that most people simply find unimaginable. Excitingly, exploration of the psilocybin occasioned mystical experience seems to provide a model system for rigorous and prospective investigation of these awakening experiences. Further research will surely reveal underlying biological mechanisms of action, will likely result in an array of therapeutic applications. And more importantly, because such experiences are foundationally related to our moral and our ethical understandings, further research may ultimately prove to be crucial to the very survival of our species. Thank you.
Interesting, isn't it? I'd like to add just a few things. This was 8 years ago. There has been a lot of work done, a lot of studies since then. It has shown, now some of this I don't have my references on, but listen to lectures, that such success for trauma and PTSD that some say it is far more effective than either talk therapy or antidepressants. It is so successful that the FDA has designated it as breakthrough therapy, which some think is a pretty big deal. I think you said it means it's fast track. Well, it's better than not fast track. And 2 companies right now are in phase 2 clinical trials of psilocybin-based therapy. Do not try this at home. These are done with professionals, people who have serious PTSD. You probably have friends might want to look into getting involved in the trials, but it's not just recreational. I guess that's all. Oh no, a little bit more. One view I've heard and studies have shown is that it really increases plasticity in the brain, similar to hypnotherapy, only more so. And it's interesting to me that hypnotherapy and this therapy are so successful in allowing people to look at the same world, the same traumatic past, and reframe it in new ways, create new circuitry. The similarity to mystical experiences and enlightenment is huge overlap. There are a few differences, but when I had an enlightenment experience in my youth, I thought, I don't know if, within you, without you, I didn't know if it was coming from my brain or coming into my brain, but it didn't really matter. And since then, unlike a lot of people who had those experiences and just dedicated their lives to spiritual growth, I felt that we are hardwired. I believe that for decades, hardwired to have these experiences of oneness and love, self-love as well as love of others. And these kinds of experiences, which would make sense with the cancer patients, is losing all fear of death permanently. So that's an interesting effect. For our small group discussion, I would like really to address how you think this therapy is or can be effective in contrast to other therapies, and any thoughts you have about the brain being hardwired. And we're talking mystical, we're not talking religious, though it's mystical experiences, I believe, that led to people creating structures of churches and religions. So, time for small group discussion. And the guidelines for Social Sunday are you start going around the circle. Each person has up to 2 minutes to talk about their response, not their vacation last month. And at the end of that, it's more of an open conversation, but please also limit yourself to 2 minutes. Have a goal that everyone at your table has equal airtime. Thank you.
You don't have to do that.
Never had any effect on it. Oh, I can just go to sleep. Yeah, I don't know about that. Well, what is a regular dose? I mean, they were talking about lower diet doses on here. The secret. They were showing the people lying on their back on the couch with the mask on, and I thought they were supposed to be watching a candle or something.
Very calm, relaxing,
Yeah, take your time and then we just say.
that's a sleep.
So, you don't know why regular dosage is.
The research is it's not, it's just
And what strikes me about art is the elasticity Before you have a picture.
Total self-acceptance.
This is the mission.
You end up having to walk an epiphany. They were saying there that
There's actually, in Southern California, mommy migrants, they were a little bit, probably not enough to do a survey, but it was not
Yeah. You know what? It was so smooth. I mean, it was people that it was stronger than others, but it was really much stronger. But I was concerned. I was concerned I wanted to be able to tell stories Which is very, very, very. But it is well, yeah, Bill understands. You know,
private people, the seniors never do it. It's just private people. She says that she lives kind of on the outskirts.
Okay, let's start to wind up our table discussion, and soon we will have open mic. Yes. Peyote mushroom, and it's a very similar name, peyote, just by the smell. Well,
enough money.
People are asking me, there's a heroic dose, which means you're bring it on. I'm going to get something out of this, and I'm not easily frightened. Oh, sorry. I keep getting asked about dosing.
She makes my point that she can't see anything. And she has to pay.
I watch so many. My favorite thing is we're going to start now with open mic. People that would like to share something, either something they brought to the table or somebody else said and they don't want to stuff it up. Comments you think would benefit everyone. So please raise your hand if you'd like to address the group. You want to share?
Okay. Yeah, I'm Bob from Ashland. And so I just want to tell you that the average dopester who thinks that all drugs should be legal is a terrifying concept. And the likely person that will dose you against your will without your informed consent. I would beware of this. This is very dangerous.
Okay, I was a bit of a star at our table because I have taken LSD. In fact, I even took LSD before it became illegal in San Francisco. I'm just curious how many other people have taken LSD or psycho. Okay, all right.
Many years ago.
Many years, okay. So what, maybe a third or something? I found it a powerful, really wonderful experience. And what I mentioned at this table was I found it a powerful experience. I certainly know what Benjamin Lewis was talking about when you have a sense of the sacred and the unity of people. It was a wonderful experience. It was very random, and sometimes there were some negative things that I had to work through. They didn't have to take me to the emergency room with an antipsychotic sort of thing. You just let it kind of flow over you, and you go on. But what I did, just as a result of, I would say maybe 5 experiences in my lifetime, is that it all was very random, and I can see the power of someone who understands the experience and directs you to being able to apply it to your life. I think I can see why it could be a breakthrough, and certainly am quite willing to support any effort to continue research on
Thank
it.
you, Lori. Honey,
What?
so we get Ruth next.
Oh, I took some. Yeah, it's fine. As I say, I didn't find the mushroom, psilocybin, and the LSD that different. So.
Before I came,
Only one per table, only one per table.
before I came here, I took some grounded mushroom and LSD
Of course.
about an hour before I came here. And as a result, I was able to see the movie before I arrived. And I already knew Bo was going to say that the second person isn't allowed at the table.
My comment was, as a retired psychiatrist, I saw the people who didn't do well on these recreational drugs. These are certainly, I've been retired before the studies of this particular drug. But I would end up having to take care of people who became flagrantly psychotic as a result of these recreational drugs and the seriousness of that. And my hope is that whatever studies they're doing, they do them in a safe, controlled way, and it stays that way.
Thank you, Ruth.
And I think that what Ruth has said pushes toward the idea of not legalization, but decriminalization. And when I took my ill-spent youth some of these drugs, who knew what the heck it was? Who knew whether it was the right dosage? Even if it had next to it, oh, well, my friend had a good trip. All of that needs to be regulated and monitored, and the idea of free flow of this stuff is probably more likely to happen if the current regime stays. And I mean, you can't be driving under the influence of these things. All of those kinds of things are more likely to happen as it is, rather than through decriminalization and some kind of control.
I understand.
And control at low prices so that the black market or the illegal market doesn't supersede the legal market.
Well, the only thing I've heard that they're pushing for is the therapy with trained therapists, probably a psychiatrist to screen. I knew people back in the early 70s who just had a psychotic break. My own son had a psychotic break the first time he smoked marijuana. So that's weird. It needs to be seriously controlled. And as I mentioned to them, even at the long meditation retreats, 7, 9, 14 days, they screen for any kind of psychological, psychiatric problems. They don't want people going deep if they have those, for fear of serious consequences.
Hi, we had a couple of things that I think are worth sharing. One is that the trials that are being done on people are being done on people who volunteer to participate in the trial. That's not the general population. So that the results that you see are not immediately generalizable, right? They're restricted to groups of people who, for whatever reason, are receptive or accepting of taking an experimental psychedelic compound. All right? That's one. The second that I'd share is that, to me, the data that I've seen is most consistent with this being disinhibition as the basis for the activity. Specifically for the drug that we're talking about today, it appears to impair or block serotonin receptor, so-called serotonin receptor 2, which impairs activity in the amygdala and the hippocampus, which are fear response avoidance sites, right? And actually disinhibits, as a result of this, the forebrain, the part of the forebrain that's involved in cognitive perception of things. So in a way, this is kind of taking away your negative response to the reality, you see what I mean, that you're facing, at the present time. That's, of course, not an answer. That's just the current neurophysiology of what's known about the way the drug seems to interact with the connections in the nervous system.
And those brain changes have been noted. I think probably Richie Davidson, a lot of people, neuroscientists doing research on meditation and spirituality have studied multiple people having enlightenment experiences, and they have the same brain pattern. Shut down the prefrontal cortex, showing exactly some areas inhibited, some disinhibited. It's the same pattern. Makes sense. Who else?
So one of the things I got a little cold chill at the end where he said, that we had this nice thing at heart, human, and that these drugs would bring it out. I think, oh no, they're going to put it in the water, we're all going to get it, against our will. But then I started thinking, how I used to think about war. It's like when we're fighting with somebody, and ideally as a human you would have a disagreement, you would discuss it, you would work things out. But in fact, we start trying to blow each other up, kill each other, maim each other. And I'm thinking, well, when they want to experiment on an animal or an elephant or a bear, they could dart them and make them fall over. And then they operate on them or put a tracer on them or whatever. And then they all get out of the way and the thing wakes up, it's all groggy, it staggers off. And I'm thinking, this is the answer, we'll just shoot them with this stuff. In a war, we won't blow them up, they'll fall over. And then when they wake up, they'll be all nice, So then I'm thinking, okay, instead of bombing Gaza or Beirut or any country, you would just put this stuff as a gas, and everybody would go to sleep, and then would wake up all night. Well, but I do think that they do. Remember years ago they were doing experiments on spreading smallpox. And they could vaporize smallpox and kill all of Los Angeles like in 20 minutes, just, blow it out. Well, then vaporize this stuff, and they've got some of that technology. You just put it in these particles and blow it over, the city. And you could, the idea that we don't have to blow each other up anymore. That's my thinking.
I like that.
My hope is if Neuralink or one of those companies can start scheduling appointments to give people an enlightenment experience, it would change the world if a large number of people experienced that much oneness and connectedness with others. But I think it's a little late for that.
Something that I would suggest is on Netflix. There's a thing. It was released in 2022. Michael Pollan, who was a big food editor with the New York Times, wrote a book called How to Change Your Mind, and it also researches and investigates this whole idea of using psychedelic therapy. And I thought it was very, very good. So it's on Netflix, and I think it's still there on how to change your mind.
Wait, do we have any jump rule? Anyone who hasn't spoken yet that would like to speak? Anyone?
We're all high.
Yeah. Okay, Paul, thank you.
Our natural bodies participate in the chemistry and electricity homeostasis. We have these occurrences that return us to the center, inhibit Bo mentioned, an inhibitory factor in terms of fear and anger. The larger question is, to the extent that with technology and analysis of substances, we're able to more automate the mechanisms in the body, dispense adrenaline at the proper time, dispense insulin exactly the proper time, give a large injection of energy automatically within the body to a runner that needs to perform in a run to finish and pass his opponent. Should we participate in controlling ourselves for the betterment of ourselves?
Okay, and on that note, we're going to have, unless someone who hasn't spoken yet, okay, we're going to do a little bit of trivia, and since Pam forgot the trivia book, these two tables have generously come up with 5 questions each. More's good. Sounds good, more's better. Brad, would you like to read that one?
On the television program Leave It to Beaver, who was the actor who played Beaver's older brother?
Okay, you all have a sheet of paper and a pen. If somebody used that sheet of paper, I can get you another one.
All right, number two, can you name the song from the 1930s that involved Where Bluebirds Flew? There was a song in the 1930s that involved bluebirds flying. What was the name of that song? This is a bonus question because there's actually 2 songs. Number three, who starred in the first talking movie? Who starred in the first talking movie? Do you need me to read?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Who starred in the first talking movie? The first talking movie. Okay, number 4, what were the last names of Romeo and Juliet?
Brad actually knows it.
I think a lot of people know. Number 5, what Irving Berlin musical has more hit songs than any other?
That's cheating, does that say?
What Irving Berlin musical on Broadway has more hit songs than any other? Number 6, what future president starred in the movie This Is the Army? What future president starred in the movie This Is the Army? Number 7, this is a tough one. Who wrote Over the Rainbow? You want music or lyrics? Either one.
Bonus points for both.
Bonus points, yeah. And the final one we had was, who wrote the music of Porgy and Bess?
Nice. Thank you, Fran.
right. Away from popular culture here. Number nine. What was Alexander the Great's horse's name? Moving into classics here, okay? Number 10. What is the highest wave potential and at which site? Is that correct?
Theoretically, what is the largest wave height possible on planet Earth?
All right, got that clear? Everybody got that down? No Googling. No Googling. Okay. What are the number 11 most populated countries in the world? 5, yes. Okay? And you have to, if you get, no, let's do 4, okay? If you get 4, that'll be okay. Yeah. All right. All right. No, we'll just cut it off for the next one. All right. How does the median household income in the United States at the present time compare to the average median household income in 1970? Okay?
Okay, here come the answers. All right. The actor who played Bieber's older brother was Tony Dow. Yay. The song from the 1930s where bluebirds flew is either Over the Rainbow and or White Cliffs of Dover. Who starred in the first talking movie was Al Jolson. The last names of Romeo and Juliet were Montague and Capulet.
Did anybody get that?
Yes. Come on. What Irving Berlin musical has more hit songs than any others? Annie, Get Your Gun. Right? What future president starred in the movie This Is the Army? Yes, Ronald Reagan. And who wrote Over the Rainbow? Anybody get this? Harold Arlen. And finally, who wrote the music of Porgy and Bess? I heard the answer. It's Gershwin. Gershwin.
Thank you.
Thank you for reading.
Moving on.
All right, number 9. Alexander the Great's horse's name was?
I would just like to thank Bo for making that question so that I don't feel so bad about last week's.
Bucephalus, come on, guys. Yeah. Okay. Away.
400 feet is the largest height possible on Earth of a wave, and it would be in the Pacific. It all has to do with water depth, fetch, and a bunch of other variables. Extended wind for an extended period of time, theoretical wind velocity. How do I know that? I took a course in oceanology once.
All right, great.
Anybody get that?
I certainly didn't. All right, 5 most populated countries. Who'd care to provide that?
Start with one table. So
India, China, U.S., and Indonesia.
India, China. India, China.
India's first. That's correct. As of this year, India has the highest China is second, US is third.
Name recession?
No, Russia doesn't even figure in the top 10.
We have the table that wants to contribute.
What? Pakistan. Pakistan, yeah. And at 300,000, then I believe Brazil is next after that.
Wow. So if you got 3, you get a point.
All right. And how does the median household income in the U.S. at the present time compare to median household income in 1970? No, it's corrected for inflation, it's substantially lower. Yeah, it's about 20 to 22% lower than it was in 1970. That's the median. Do not confuse the aggregate increase in average income with what has happened at the mid-level on a population basis. Those are entirely distinct, and they represent the increasing distribution of wealth into the top 1% and 10% of the population.
According to the internet, Indonesia is number 4. Indonesia?
Yes.
All right,
Okay, since 2 tables make questions, I'm not sure how to count points.
Didn't I say no Googling?
We do our own research.
Especially if it contradicts me.
If there, other than those who helped with the questions, and thank you so much, of the other tables, who had 10 or more? Whoa. 8 or more? These were too hard. 6 or more? Okay.